Good morning. Today I'll be reading the sixth book in the Left Behind series. The name of this book is Assassins, and I'm going to be reading chapter 5 today. And I'll begin reading now. Rayford hated feeling isolated from the others. With his dream of eliminating Carpathia, even temporarily, he ironically had more in common with Hattie than with anyone. It was his own fault for losing control and making them tread carefully around him. But what was going on downstairs at midnight? All of them praying together always encouraged Rayford. But did this constitute a meeting of the tribulation force without him? Should he be offended? Of course, they were free to meet in any combination of brothers and sisters they wished. It wasn't like they were conducting business. What was the matter with him? When did he start caring about such trivia? Rayford tiptoed down so as not to disturb them. Sure enough, they sat on the couch and in chairs in the living room, heads bowed, praying. Everyone but Hattie. Rayford was moved and suddenly wanted to join them. His motive wasn't pure. He wanted to reconcile with them without having to apologize again. Inserting himself in a spiritual exercise would speak volumes. He could even pray for forgiveness for his outburst. As he slipped into the living room, Rayford's conscience was suddenly crushed. What a fool! How small! To be so blessed of God despite wrenching pain, and then to want to use prayer to manipulate. He nearly retreated, but now wanted to join them for the right reasons. He didn't even want to pray aloud. He just wanted to agree with them before God, to be part of his body, this church. He knew he would feel worthy. He knew he would feel worthy to lead them again only when he realized that he was not worthy aside from the gift of God. He was the object of the prayer meeting. First one, then another mentioned his name. They prayed for his strength, for peace, for comfort in his grief. They prayed for supernatural contentment when that was humanly impossible. He could have been offended to be, in essence, gossiped about in prayer, but he was ashamed. He had been worse than he had feared. Rayford knelt silently. Eventually, the emotion and fervency of prayer so humiliated and humbled him that he was powerless to hide any more. He pitched forward onto his elbows and wept out loud. He was just sorry, so sorry, and grateful they believed him worth the effort to restore. Chloe was the first to rush to Rayford, but rather than lift him, she merely knelt with him and embraced him. He felt Buck's tentative hand on his back and wished he could tell his son-in-law not to worry, that his support meant everything. Tyson laid his warm hand on Rayford's head and called on God to be everything this man needs you to be during the most difficult season anyone has ever been asked to endure. Rayford found himself sobbing for the second time that night, only now he did not wail the mournful cries of the hopeless. He felt bathed in the love of God and the support of his family. He had not given up the idea that God might still use him in the comeuppance of Nikolai Carpathia, but that was, at least briefly, less important than his place within the group. They could handle his not always being strong. They would stick with him when he was human and worse. They would support him even when he failed. How could he ever express what that meant to him? It was not lost on Rayford that Leah, though she had understandably not felt comfortable enough to touch him, had prayed for him. She did not pretend to know the problem, only indicating a recognition that he was apparently not himself and needed a touch from God. When the prayers finally fell silent, Rayford could muster only "Thank you, God." Tyson hummed a familiar tune. First Chloe, then the others sang, "Blessed be the tie that binds our hearts in Christian love. The fellowship of kindred minds is like to that above." The four of them rose and returned to where they were sitting. Rayford pulled up a chair. "Thought I was getting voted out of the club," he said. Tyson chuckled. We would not even let you resign, he said. I would like to ask you, Leah, if you would mind waiting until tomorrow to tell your story. I think we have all been through enough for one day, and we would like to give you our full attention. I was going to suggest the same, she said. Thank you. Do you have any aversion to staying where Floyd used to sleep? Rayford said. Not unless anyone else has a problem with it, she said. And I know this sounds weird, but I won't sleep well unless I have a sense of the rest of the place. Could I get a quick tour just so I know where everything is? Chloe and I will be happy to show you, Rayford said, hoping to start a connection that would facilitate conversation. I'll check on the baby, Buck said. Tyson rose wearily. Good night, all. Rayford was impressed that Chloe knew enough to ignore the cellar. She started in the back of the duplex where Leah had come in. There's nothing in the other flat, she said. It was more structurally damaged anyway. You came through the nook area here. This has been rebuilt since the earthquake, when a tree smashed it and killed the wife of the owner. Her husband was at our church at the time and died when that collapsed. Then the kitchen, of course, and off to the left, the living room. Then the dining room, where we never eat, but a lot of us work. Past the stairs, there is a bathroom, and the front room where Buck and I sleep with the baby. Upstairs, they showed her the other bath. Rayford's room, Tyson's, and Floyd's. Thanks, she said. And where did Ritz stay? Rayford and Chloe looked at each other. Oh, he said, I wasn't aware you knew he had lived here. Was it a secret? The whole place is. I'm not supposed to know he lived here? I knew Dr. Charles and Mr. Williams and Hattie lived here. I just didn't know you knew, that's all. Rayford said, I hope it doesn't make me sound suspicious. She stopped. Of what? You want to examine my mark? Something gave you the confidence to bring every emergency my way. If I wasn't trustworthy, would I have risked my life for all of you? I'm sorry. Really, Mr. Steele, if I was working for the GC, I could have tipped off the potent with his lover when his lover miscarried his child while I attended her. I could have reported Dr. Charles when he incinerated the remains rather than follow legal procedure. I could have tipped off the authorities when your son-in-law got me to release Ritz with a gaping head wound. You think I don't know who you people were and why no one could know where you lived? Miss Rose. It's Mrs. Rose, and frankly, the reason I assumed Ritz lived here was because I knew the airport had been virtually demolished. And in case you don't remember, he was with you when you brought Hattie in. Was I to assume you came from your hiding place and he rendezvoused with you from somewhere else? You're right. There'll be infiltrators, Mr. Steele. I don't know how they'll do it, but I wouldn't put anything past the GC. But until they perfect some sort of a foolproof replica of the sign we can see only on each other, I can't imagine a spy foolish enough to waltz in here. Run me through any grill you want, but I'll thank you to never again admit you're suspicious of me just because I assumed a man lived with you, whose first name I don't even remember. Rayford looked pleadingly at her. Would a tough day be an excuse? I've had one too, she said. Tell me you're not afraid of me before I turn in. I'm not. I'm sorry. I am too. Forgive me. I overreacted. So much for bonding, Rayford thought. Don't give it another thought. You trust me then? Yes. Now go to bed and let us do the same. Feel free to use the bathroom before the rest of us. You're telling me you trust me. Rayford could tell even Chloe was losing patience with Leah. I'm tired, Mrs. Rose. I apologize. I'm convinced, okay? No, no, Chloe said. I have to get to bed. You think I'm blind or stupid or what? Leah said. Excuse me, Chloe said. Where's the shelter? Rayford flinched. You don't want me to be suspicious, and now you ask about a shelter? You don't have one? Tell me how you would know to ask. Leah shook her head. This is worse than you're thinking me subversive. You think I'm daft? Not anymore, I don't, Chloe said. Tell me how you know there's more here, and I'll show it to you. Thank you. If I hid out in a safe house, I'd assume its security would one day be compromised. Either you have a place to run to on a moment's notice, or this place turns upside down. Plus, and this is so obvious it offends me to have to raise it, am I to assume Hattie sleeps outside? Hattie, Rayford said. Yeah, remember her? No seal on her forehead, but fairly visible here until you all get spiritual. Where does she sleep? Chloe sighed. Go to bed, Dad. I'll show her. Thank you. They turned to head down the stairs. Rayford couldn't resist. You can be obnoxious, Mrs. Rose. You know that? Daddy, Chloe said, her back still to him. We deserve that, and you know it. Leah stopped and turned to face him. I respect everyone here, she said, but that was sexist. You'll call me a feminist, but you would not tell a man, insulted like I was, that his response was obnoxious. I probably would, Rayford said, but the point is taken. Thanks for making me feel like a creep, Leah said. I spoke to your son-in-law earlier in a way I have rarely spoken to anyone, and now I've done it again. I don't know what's happening to me. Rayford felt exactly the same, but didn't care to admit it. Promise me tomorrow we can discuss a truce, he said. That's a deal. The woman descended, and Rayford was finally able to get to bed. He hung his robe and lay back on the cool sheets, feeling morning after soreness from his work in the cellar and the backyard, and it wasn't even morning yet. He locked his fingers behind his head and within minutes felt himself drifting until he heard footsteps on the stairs, then a knock at the door. I was showing Leah the cellar, Chloe said, where Hattie sleeps, only she's not there. Hattie? Where could she be? She's not in the house, not outside as far as we can see. And Dad, a lot of her stuff is gone. She took a heavy load. Rayford rose and pulled on his robe again, wondering if he had the energy to deal with yet one more crisis before collapsing. Check the shed for Ken's car. Make sure Bucks is still in the yard. She couldn't get far on foot. Buck and I can each take a vehicle and start looking for her. Dad, we have no idea when she left. She might have been gone since the burial. I don't remember seeing her since. Do you? He shook his head. We can't let her out of here with all she knows. Talk about vulnerable. If she got someone to pick her up somewhere, you'll never catch her. They followed footprints to what had once been the street in front of the house. Now it was just a dirt path strewn with chunks of asphalt and dotted with potholes. She could have headed either direction. Rayford fired up Ken Ritz's Suburban, and Buck threw dirt from all four wheels on his Land Rover. He sent Buck north and headed south. When it came clear Hattie was nowhere in Rayford's vicinity, he called Buck. Nothing here either, Buck said. I got a bad feeling about this. It's not like we can report her missing. I've got one other idea, Rayford said. I'll see you back at the house. Rayford called Pewaukee and reached the answering machine. He said, T, this is Ray. If you're there, I need you to pick up. He waited a few moments, then reluctantly dialed Delanty's personal cell phone. Rayford was greeted with a groggy hello. Sorry, T, did I wake you? Of course you did. Sup, Ray? I don't want this to be an emergency, but if it's not, I'm going to ask why you called now. Rayford filled him in. So I was just wondering if Tweedledee and Tweedledum are still kicking around out there. Ernie and Bo? Haven't seen Ernie for almost a year. Kind of miss him, even if he was an idiot. I heard he headed west. Beauregard Hanson still hangs around trying to exercise his 5% stake in the place. Why? Just wondering if Hattie might have used him to get somewhere to fly her out of there. I left at 6, had a guy in the tower till 9. We shut down after that. Anyway, I can find out if a big plane left there this evening. Ray, I can't call a guy at this time of the morning and ask him that. Why not? I just did. Yeah, but you were pretty sure I wouldn't hate you for it. Don't you? I'm not allowed to say. We're brothers, remember? Speaking of that, you're the only brother I've got left, if you catch any meaning. What? Rayford told him about Doc. Oh, man, I'm sorry, Ray. You don't suspect Hattie. Ray told him Floyd's own theory on how he contracted the poison, but still, I've got dire reasons to know where she is. I'll check the log. I don't want you to go out at this hour. I can do it from here, bro. Just a minute. Rayford heard T's bed squeak and then computer sounds. He came back on the phone. I'm scrolling through here. Not much traffic tonight. Mostly small stuff. Business planes, couple of GC. Huh, what? There is a unique entry here. Oversized Quantum. That's like a huge Learjet. Different manufacturer. Arrived pilot only at 22:30. Left 23:30 hours with a fuel top off. No cargo. One unidentified passenger. Destination unreported. That's all. Well, we've got a column here that asks whether it was paid, charged, or okayed. This one was okayed by BH. I don't know the specs on the Quantum, Rayford said. What kind of speed and range? Oh, fast as a heavy, but probably needs one more top off before going overseas. How far you figure your escapee's going anyway? I wouldn't put it past her to think she could march into Carpathia's office and personally give him what for. Well, there'll be no catching or intercepting that craft, will there? Nope. What is it? Almost one? That thing's been airborne. I assume at maximum speed, an hour and a half. Even with 20 minutes on the East Coast for landing, fuel, and takeoff, it's still going to be too far away by now. You got enough information that I could radio the craft? Think about it, Rayford. Whoever's flying that plane is not going to answer unless he knows who's calling. Maybe I could spin him a yarn, urge him to put down in Spain due to a fuel irregularity or something that turned up here or wherever he refueled. You're dreaming, Rayford, and I'd like to be. Thanks for nothing, friend. You're going to have to go round her up yourself and turn some of your contracts onto her over there. Contacts onto her over there. I know. I appreciate it, T. I'll try to get out to the strip for some co-op business tomorrow. Today, you mean? Sorry, Rayford said. I might bring a couple of people from our house church. We want to get behind this thing in a big way. For all Rayford knew, Hattie had the power to blow the lid off the co-op, too. Mac McCullum had a full morning. After tipping his cap to Annie Christopher as he passed her office in the hangar, he arrived at his own office to 3 messages. The first was a list generated by Leon Fortunato's secretary, outlining personnel authorized on the flight to Botswana in 3 days. The Supreme Commander, his valet, an assistant, a cook, and 2 servers would make up the GC contingent. 2 aides would accompany President Nwego of Botswana. Note that the Supreme Commander has decreed that the plane shall be stationary while the Botswanans are aboard. The list also included captain and first officer in the cockpit, with an asterisk after that latter. At the bottom of the page, the asterisk referred to a note. The Supreme Commander believes you will be pleased by the resolution of this matter. The second document was a note from personnel regarding the application of Abdullah 216 first officer. Not only had he been ranked high in every technical aspect, save verbal acuity, somewhat laconic, read the summary, but he had also been judged an outstanding citizen loyal to the global community. Fortunato himself had scribbled in the margin, "Congratulations on a wonderful find, Mac. Smith will make a great contribution to the cause." If you only knew, Mac thought. Mac's third missive was from David Hassid. "Important message for you, Captain." It read, "In person, please." Mac and David had learned to appear impersonal and professional in front of staff. Their difference in age helped. The entire GC complex, though ostensibly anti-military because of Carpathia's avowed pacifism, was in its organizational structure. Mac felt comfortable with the chain of command, having spent so much of his life in uniform, and David often deferred to Mac's counsel because David had come to the GC from the private sector. Now the two were on equal footing in separate branches, and it appeared their occasional face-to-faces attracted no attention. David's secretary ushered Mac into David's office. Captain, David said, shaking his hand. Director, Max said, sitting. When the secretary left, David said, "Get this," and turned around his laptop so Mac could read it. The captain squinted at the screen and read Rayford's account of the previous day's activity at the safe house in Illinois. "Oh man," he said, "that doctor. The girl lives, the doctor dies. Beat that." "It gets worse," David said. Mac reached the news of Hattie's disappearance. He settled back in his chair. Does he really think? David held up a finger to stall him. "Let me get rid of this while I'm thinking of it." With a few keystrokes, the heavily encrypted file had been trashed. "That she'll come here? I can't imagine. I understand she's ditzy, but how far does she think she'll get? It's a miracle she survived this long with all the things Carpathia has tried to get rid of her. She shows her face in New Babylon. She's history." Mac nodded. "She's got to be holing up somewhere, waiting to surprise him. I can't see her getting close." Mac shook his head. "I know. Your people loaded 2 sets of metal detectors on the 216 last week. Plan to use them even for dignitaries. Of course, that's due to a basic distrust of Pete, too, you know." "I know firsthand. Fortunato's got all 10 kings, regional internationals, subpotents, or whatever St. Nick has allowed them to call themselves this week, primed for that snuffing. It's almost like he wants them willing to do the deed themselves." "Like those guys would agree on anything," David said. "How many of them you think are really loyal to Carpathia?" Max shrugged. "More than half. Not more than 7, though. I know 3 who would usurp giving half a chance." "Would they take him out?" "In a New Babylon minute, course. Pete would too, you think?" Max stepped forward and pressed his palms together. "I've heard him say it. He rubs Carpathia raw with his brashness, but he pretends to be cooperative. Carpathia makes nice with him all the time, as if they handpicked each other. I'll tell you what, if Leon doesn't get rid of Matthew soon, he's going to have to answer. It's a directive clear as if it were on paper." David stood and pulled some files from a drawer behind him, then spread them on the desk. "In case anyone's watching," he said, and Mac leaned over as if studying them. "They're upside down, you idiot," Mac said, controlling a smile. "Wouldn't want to be distracted," David said. "You know what Rayford used to dream out loud? Tell me." "Crashing on purpose with Carpathia aboard." David straightened and cocked his head. "That's not even biblical, is it? I mean, if he's who we think he is, he's not going to die till the 42nd month, is he? And even then, he doesn't stay dead." "I'm just telling you." "Doesn't even sound like Captain Steele. He always seems so even and sensible." "Didn't mean to spoil your image of him." "Believe me, you didn't. I can't deny I've fantasized about how I'd do it." Max stood and headed to the door. "Same here," he said. And that's the end of chapter 5. Next, we'll be reading chapter 6. Thank you for joining me, and you have a wonderful day.